Hello everyone, once again, welcome back to the Revision Channel. Your host, moi, Sam, and today I thought we will do mathematics. Now, maths, it kind of requires a lot of dedication to do videos on it because there are so many things you can do and there are so many ways to do it. I thought I might just do certain topics that are important and that people might think are a bit difficult to explain, that they're not really that difficult, such as functions. I'm going to cover that in the future of this video. I guess, in a couple of minutes for you. So, as I was saying, I'm going to cover functions in this video, because functions is one of those things that you're like, what the hell is this? But once you get your head around it, it's like, oh yeah, you just do this, and you're done. I'll also cover, combining functions, inverse functions as well, because there's that to it. I'm also going to cover basic equations as well that you will need for tests and all that, and explain how they're helpful. Some of the equations I'm not going to go massively into detail for, because, you should already know what they're used for, and if you don't, it's just common sense. It says in the title for most of them, like, for example, volume of a sphere, you can use it to work out the volume of a sphere, so I don't need to go too much in depth into most of those. Anyway, starting off, I have the quadratic formula. Now, when you first look at this formula, it can be seen as, well, a cluster truck of numbers and letters and signs and whatever, and I'm here to explain all that. Now, it goes as follows: minus b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now, if you have no clue what I'm talking about, and you have no idea what the hell I just said, probably because I said it too quickly, but there should be an image somewhere over here or over here of the quadratic equation. Probably, with the editing software I use, I probably won't be able to write, over something, so it might be in brackets divided by something, and the divide symbol is just slash. So, when you have the quadratic formula, right, you're going to get two answers from it, right? X equals so, or x equals so. Now, this is where the plus or minus in the equation comes from. Now, you don't write it down in a calculator, obviously. It's going to be quite difficult to work out in your head, let's say that. And anyway, so you put it into a calculator, and you put it in with the plus and the minus. That's where the minus be. Plus or minus square root of so and so and so. Anyway, so you then do two equations, so I got two answers. Now that's because on a graph, the line that you would get goes through two x-axis, not two x-axis, but it goes through the x-axis twice. Now, it's called a parabola. That's what you get on the graph. Anyway, if you're wondering what all the letters refer to, it refers to how the equation, or what numbers you'll use in the equation, basically, and how you would then use it. Let's say you have the equation of 3x squared plus 7 minus 1 equals 0, okay? You can't factorize that quadratic equation, so what you do is you would use the quadratic formula. Now, as I said, the quadratic formula, it's great for when you can't factorize quadratic equations, or you can't be asked to solve it out graphically. You just punch it into the calculator a bunch of times and huzzah, you have your answer. Well, two answers actually. When it comes to the a, b and c factor with the equation, it basically just goes along the equation, 3x plus 7 minus 1, right? Now a is going to equal 3 because it's a 3x. Now if it was just x squared, it would just be, well, 1, because you only have 1 of the x squared. But if it's 3x squared, like I said, then it would be a equals 3 because it's 3x squared. Anyway, plus 7, b equals 7, so you get that, and then c equals minus 1, and it just goes across the equation. If you were to write this down in the quadratic formula, you would get minus 7 plus or minus square root of 7 squared minus 4 ac, and a would refer to 3 and c would refer to minus 1, so it'd be minus 7 plus minus square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times minus 1 over 2 times 3. You then punch down to the calculator the plus and the minus sign to get the two answers. And that's where you get x equals so and so and x equals so and so. Now I do need to work this out because I cannot do that in my head because it becomes too decimal pointy for me. And if you put that into a calculator, it becomes x equals 0.14 and was it minus 2.47. And as a side note, just to make it simpler, you don't need to continually keep on writing minus 7 plus minus square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times minus 1. You can just simplify it to be minus 7 plus minus square root of 61. Now, moving on. As I said at the start of this video, I'm going to be covering functions in this video. Now, not only is it because I'm doing functions in class at the moment, and, well, I think it might be good just to go over it for those people who aren't doing it in class and want to learn about functions, or who are doing it in my class. Hello there, math class, if you're watching this. I'm doing functions, so feel free to, well, watch the video and understand functions. Anyway, let's just start off with evaluating functions, one of the basic things you can do with functions, because we get to combining functions and inverse functions. Yeah. Anyway, let's start off with evaluating functions. This is probably one of the simplest things you can do with functions, just because it's rather simple. It's just substituting different things into different things. You'll get it when I explain it, honestly. Once you get your head around functions, it's really simple. Now, functions can be written as f of x. I'll put it up on the screen somewhere. It's just f with x in brackets right after it. That means f of x. Now, often you have some kind of equation related with f of x. It's something like x so-and-so plus so-and-so plus so-and-so. And then you basically just substitute any number that you want to find into that equation wherever x is, and then you can work it out from there. Sounds simple, right? Let's say the equation of f of x equals x squared minus x plus 7. Now, let's say if you want to find f of 3. So you just put 3 where the x is. So, for example, 3 squared, because that's where the x is, minus 3, because that's where the x is, plus 7. And you could work it out, it's going to be 13. So, as I said, you just work the equation down just by substituting the number, 3, in this case, because of f of 3, into the equation, which we were given as f of x equals x squared minus x plus 7. And hopefully, if I've done the editing correctly, it should all be written up here or here somewhere, neatly and typed up so you can see. And if it is typed up, header, times symbol is an asterisk star thing, plus or minus you can do that on the computer. Divide is going to be a slash, and when you do something to the power of something else, you often have that little up arrow. So you'll see that when I do x to the power of 2, it'll be x to the power of 2, just because you can't do superscript in the editing software. Anyway, moving on to combining and inverse functions. I'll cover combining first. Now, this is where you put the fun in functions. When I say fun, I mean mortifying dread of confusion and utmost despair. When I was looking at this first, I was just like, wait, hang on a minute, so you gotta do this, and then, wait, no, because of this, and you have to put that, no, wait, hang on a minute, what? Now, honestly, when I first looked at it, this is combining functions, I honestly had no clue what it meant, okay? But I spent anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes looking through it. I did a practice question off on a piece of paper that's now in a bin off to a landfill somewhere. And, well, actually no, we recycle our paper because we're human beings. Anyway, as I was saying, I did a practice question on it on a piece of paper, and 10-15 minutes of looking through trying to understand it, and once I got my head fully wrapped around combining functions, I then moved on to inverse functions. But we'll get to that in a couple of minutes after I have explained combining functions. Sometimes you may be given two functions, let's say f of x and g of x, just for the time being. It can be anything, it can be h of x, z of x, whatever the hell you want. Now, let's move on to what they are and the equations and all that. Now, when it comes to combining functions, you would have it written as fg of x. That is f of x and g of x combined into fg of x. Now, in order to work this out, you kind of have to do a weird thing where you kind of put fg of x and then you kind of pull it out into all these different brackets. So you have f, open bracket, g, open bracket of x, close bracket, close bracket. Then you can then work out with the equations of f of x and g of x by substituting into that and then kind of working it out that way. Let's put our equations into the example. In fact, the example I'm using is from the book, so you can then see it that way. In fact, all the examples I have used have been from the book, and if you haven't understood what I've said, then you can look in the book with the example that I have used from the book, and then understand it that way. So it's kind of a way of making sure you understand the material, and if you don't, you can then check out the same things that I have done in the book, and have a look from there, and hope you understand it from there. Anyway, as I said, let's move on to the equations of what f of x equals and what g of x equals. Let's say f of x equals 2x minus 10, and g of x equals minus x over 2. To then work out f g of x, we'll then, as I said, do that whole bracket thing by doing f bracket g bracket x bracket bracket, and work it out by substituting the equations into that from there. You then end up with f bracket minus x over 2 close bracket. Now that minus x over 2 refers to the g of x, as I was talking about, and f refers to the other equation that f of x is. So we then, with that bracket of g of x, we then put that into f of x's equation. F of x's equation? You know what I mean. The equation with f of x. Now, since the equation was 2x minus 10, we then put g of x, where x was, that was minus x over 2, and 2x minus 10 was f of x's equation. F of x, the equation that f of x had. So we then do 2, and where the x was, we put minus x over 2 in the brackets, then minus 10. So we then end up with, as I said, 2 bracket minus x over 2 close bracket minus 10. 2 minus x over 2 can be simplified to be, well, minus x. So your answer for this will be minus x minus 10. Moving on to one of my favourite topics about functions, inverse functions. Now, I had great fun learning this by myself with no one to explain it except the book and YouTube. So I hope that me explaining it will make it easier for you to understand, and, you know, let's just dive right into it. Okay, you might see a bit of a cut here, and you might see the video slightly changing. It's just because the camera sort of died again. Yeah, this isn't the second time it's happened. It's getting annoying, but the camera isn't meant for recording lengthy bits of video. That's why I try and shorten these down as much as I can. I was talking about inverse functions, right? If you are wondering what is going on, I'm doing a narrator option that I've chosen to do in my editing software to quickly back things up a little, because when the camera shut down and died, I sort of carried on a bit and didn't realise the camera died. So I need to quickly back up and explain what I was talking about. I basically said when it comes to inverse functions, you write it as f to the power of minus 1 of x, right? That's what you're going to find. And when you get given the equation, f of x equals 12 plus x over 3, that's the equation we're working with. This is just to clear some things up, because, yeah. Anyway, basically, I was talking about the different steps you have to go through, where you have to rewrite it as x equals f of y, which means the equation will be x equals 12 plus y over 3. I was just talking about how you had to rewrite it, because I sort of messed up the camera battery. So I apologise if this makes things slightly more confusing. Anyway, I believe I got on to rewriting f of x equals 12 plus x over 3, was it? Yeah, 3. And you have to find the inverse function of that. I was saying how you have to rewrite it to be f of y. Now, when you rewrite it to be f of y, you're just rewriting the exact same thing, except x equals 12 plus y over 3. So you're just replacing the x with the y. Simple, right? Now, what you do next is you have to make y the subject of the equation. Now, you've got the moment x equals 12 plus y over 3. So in order to make y the subject, you just have to, well, if it's over 3, you times it by 3, so you get 3x equals 12 plus y. Now, once you have that, you just make y the subject. Y equals 3x minus 12. Once you have that, you basically just replace y with the inverse function, you know, f to the power of minus 1 of x equals, and then you just put the equation what you have right there. So define the inverse function of f of x equals 12 plus x over 3. The answer for that would be f to the power of minus 1 of x, or the inverse function, equals 3x minus 12. So the steps is you basically just make f of y instead of f of x. So you just rewrite the equation with f of y instead of f of x, and you have x equals, as I said, making y in the equation, replacing x as y in the equation, then kind of making y the subject by getting rid of some of the things by timesing it by 3 to make it 3x equals, and then making y the subject, and then you just replace y with the inverse function, and you have your answer right there. Inverse function equals the equation you have. I guess the Backstreet Boys were correct when they said, "Tell me why." That was the worst joke I've ever made. Anyway, those were just, things on functions for you. Now I'm going to move on to equations that you're going to need to know for the exam. And these are just general equations that will help you anyway, okay? Now, the first equation, volume of a sphere. You'll end up with a question about the volume of a sphere, or volume of a hemisphere, or whatever. You'll probably have something like that in an exam. It's just something they throw in, okay? So the equation for volume of a sphere is 4/3 pi r cubed. Now, you know what pi is, the 3.141 so and so and so and so. It goes on forever. It's an irrational number. Now, yeah, so you have 4/3, you just do that as a fraction, 4 over 3. Pi r cubed, r refers to radius, so you just do 4/3 times pi times radius cubed in your calculator. Moving on to the volume of a cone. The volume of the cone is 1/3 times pi times radius squared times height. Now, when I say height, I don't mean the height of the slant, I mean the actual height altogether, from the base to the top, kind of thing. Moving on to the surface area of things. For a sphere, you'll have the equation of 4 pi r squared. Now, 4 times pi times radius squared. Get your answer, right? The equation for the curved surface area of a cone. Now, when you did the volume of a cone, you times it by the height, which was from the center to the top. In this one, at the end, you times it by the slanted height. Okay, just keep that in mind when I say height. And this one is just pi RL. And as I said, radius is r, and slanted height is the L, and as I said, pi is 3.14 such and such. Another equation which is good to know is the compound growth and decay equation. Now, when I say compound growth and decay, I mean compound interest and all that stuff. So basically, if you have a question that says so and so puts so and so amount of money in a bank with compound interest of so and so percentage, that kind of question. Or you can have decay questions. When I say decay, I don't mean like rotting. I mean like where it goes down in value. Let's say someone buys a car and it depreciates in value by so and so percentage each year. You can use this equation to work it out. Anyway, the equation you'll have is the initial amount. So let's say £1,000 is put into a bank. Okay, you'll put £1,000 times the multiplier to the power of however long they have it in there. The multiplier refers to the percentage. So let's say £1,000 in the bank with an 8% interest for 6 years, okay? Now £1,000, that is your initial amount, so you're doing that at the start of the equation. You'll then times it by the multiplier. Now, the multiplier is 1 point, however your percentage is as a decimal. When I say the multiplier, I mean, what the percentage is plus the initial amount. So 1 refers to the £1,000, okay? Because you have one of those £1,000, or whatever you have after that. And when you write 8% as a decimal, it's going to be 0.08. Sort of just plus those together, and you get your multiplier. So if it was 8% interest and you were doing it for a certain amount of years, let's say 6 years, you put £1,000 times 1.8 to the power of 6, because you do to the power of however long you're doing, okay? So if it's 6 years, as I said, you then work it out from that. Now, the answer for this equation, despite how good and or alright I am at maths, I can't work this out in my head. It's probably 1,500 odd something, but I'm going to quickly check up the exact answer, so if you want to check what your answer is compared to mine, then you can. £1,586.87. That is £1,000 with 8% compound interest after 6 years. And using that equation, you would then do 1,000 times 1.08 to the power of 6. See? And how it all slots in. On a side note, there have been many side notes this episode, but on another side note, when you're doing depreciation, you would take away from that one to work out your multiplier instead of adding, because it's going down. So if it were, let's say someone buys a car for so and so amount of money for so and so amount of years, and it depreciates by 0.05, which is 5%. If it depreciates by 5%, you would do 1 take away 0.05, which is 0.95, and you use that as the multiplier. You see? It's because it's going down in value. I'm not going to go too in depth into the other equation I'm going to talk about, just because, you know, if you don't know what they are, just how that we've like the people I know who I'm basically giving these videos out to should know what these are and or how to use them. And if you're watching this preparing for a GCSE, then you should technically know what these are already, okay? So if you don't, then I will do a video on it, because why not? I might as well. But that's for the future, okay? For now, I'm just going to give you these equations, and you should know what to do with them, okay? Starting off with the simple compound measures, that's just the whole speed, speed, pressure, and density. Yeah, those are the ones you need to know for mass: speed, pressure, and density, okay? Now, speed is distance over time, density is just mass over volume, and pressure is just force over area. Now, for any right-angled triangle, you have Pythagoras theorem, which is just a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And moving on to trigonometry, you know, the whole SOHCAHTOA thing, this is basically sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cosine equals opposite over adjacent, and tangent equals opposite over adjacent. Those are all the different things. So you have SOHCAHTOA, you know, sine, cosine, tangent, and all that. Moving on to just some other equations which are related to that, you have the sine rule, which is basically just... I think it's better to put graphs, you know, pictures and diagrams up for what I'm about to say here, because it's sort of hard to explain, and it's definitely almost impossible for me to type it up onto like a floating word thing, which I usually have up here. It's because it involves pictures and triangles and all that. So I'm going to put a picture of the sine rule right now. It's basically just A over sine A equals C over sine C equals B over sine B. Now, we have the cosine rule, which is a bit more complicated than the sine rule. So there's that. Now, this is A squared equals C squared plus B squared minus 2BC cosine A. Again, I'm going to put up an image so you know what I'm talking about. Should be appearing any second now. And also you can use sine to work out the area of a triangle, which is half AB sine C. So those are all the things I'm going to cover in this math video, just because this is more like a general math video. It's probably going to be titled Mathematics, General Stuff, you know. I did go in depth into functions, but that's just because I'm currently doing it as a topic right now. And I did talk about the quadratic equation as well, but the quadratic equation is something that generally people should know. whether you're doing foundation or higher, etc., etc. Anyway, as I said, I went in depth into functions. I hope that has helped you if you had no idea what functions were. I hope this video has helped you with all those equations as well, especially with the compound interest and decay one, and as I said earlier, the quadratic equation. Remember, leave a like, it supports this video, makes it more people can watch it and learn what you've learned, and subscribe if you want to see any future videos of educational content. As I said, yeah, if you've enjoyed, remember to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see all you people in the next video. Bye everyone.